Hey everyone, welcome to eLearnChat, where it is all about learning. And today we've got with us Dr. Susan Nash. How are you, Susan?
I'm happy to be here. Hello.
Great. And we're having a moment of deja vu because fumble fingers here just totally screwed up. I pressed the wrong button and it killed the show. I just love that.
Nice.
I've only been doing this for like 12, 13 years. It just, uh, anyway, it was the controller. That's what happened. The controller hit me. No, I'm just kidding. I screwed up. Anyway, it's back to school day. We're going to talk about what's new and what's happening in the world of not only high school, but colleges and even corporate universities. So let's get into it right now.
This show is sponsored by Relate Corporation, Digital Learning, Corporate Video, Learning Design, and Management Consulting. Visit us at www.relatecasts.net. Thanks.
Okay, we are back, and before we do anything, please subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 1,000. We've been doing this for, I don't know, 13 years or something. We've never pushed subscriptions. We still don't, but subscribe. It makes us feel like you're actually watching. Even though we know we have quite a few watches, we've seen the numbers on some shows, just not subscribers. Eh. Anyway, Susan, it's back to school day. What happens? What's going on today with schools? What's new? What's different? How are things changing?
Well, okay, so 2022 is a really unique year because we're back from 2 years of basically strange COVID times.
Hmm.
Here in Norman, Oklahoma, there's the University of Oklahoma, and we have, I've noticed the largest freshman class ever. And
Hmm.
it was fun because last Sunday I was swimming and it's kind of near the stadium. I noticed all these people in like sparkly things going to the stadium, and they were having like a rally. So even though a lot of people are taking online courses, there's a lot of enthusiasm about a blend of face to face with online.
What do you think people like most?
Well, I think that in terms of convenience and efficiency, people like to be able to take courses online and access them and do the work. And I think that's what they like most about online. What they like most about face to face is collaboration and being able to ask questions and learn from each other.
Now, what about the social part of school?
Well, that's important, and I think that new platforms like Moodle 4.0 are trying to make the social interaction piece a lot more vibrant. And I think that during COVID, there was a lot of effort to use streaming and live webinars, et cetera, Zoom or Teams or whatever, to try to establish a sense of community. But it wasn't necessarily always 100% successful, but we're learning how to be better.
Before the show, you were talking about something that I don't really, I guess I had heard about it, just not in that term. And that was dual enrollment. That's something that's happening for high school kids, I guess juniors and seniors, and how they can take advantage of that for college. You want to talk a little bit about what that is?
Yes, well, it's been around for like 5 or 6 years. It's incredibly popular in some areas. So essentially, a junior or even I've had students as young as sophomore
Hmm.
um, taking a course that may be like say English first year composition, and they'll take the course and it applies toward their graduation from high school as well as a transcript and counts toward a degree. And it's online and it's offered by the university, but they have the counselors at the school kind of like helping them, facilitating, making, motivating them. And sometimes it's even paid for by the school district.
And that works pretty well.
It does. There are some pros. The big pros are that it's an amazingly cost saving because some students are really, really motivated, and when they graduate from high school, they also have an associate's degree. And that's great for the ones who are super achievers at the age of 16 through 18. Now, the more ordinary, just easily distracted types do not take into consideration that these courses will go on to their permanent transcript. And so that could be very devastating for applications to college. So people have to keep that in mind, and so do counselors.
Now, aside from school, and you've got the students both in middle and, or actually high school and universities and colleges, have you seen any big trends or any different trends in the world of corporate universities?
Yes. So corporate universities, there's been a lot of change, and I'd say that it depends on what the corporate university is. Now, if it's a course provider like a Coursera or Udemy, etc., I think that they partner with universities to provide course credits. And I think that they are in a struggle to survive because a lot of people like to take their courses for free and not really pay the MOOCs, etc. And then the corporate universities, let's say a large corporation that they want to train people so that they're uniformly trained in, say, safety or things like that. I think there's always been a trend to outsourcing, but even that outsourcing is diminished, and I don't see any growth in that area. I'd like to see that there are a lot of people that a lot of the providers, you would think that they would have like boomed during COVID, but some of them actually almost died. And it just depends on which industry they were in. If they were in an industry like energy industry that had massive restructurings, then anybody who provided education, especially if it's a high price point, didn't do too well because their clientele had been laid off. And you would think that they would be motivated to take courses, and they were taking more things like that. The certificates.
And it's really interesting because one of the things that hurt a lot of corporations because of forcing to go remote, people don't realize how much money went into that. Corporations had to go out and buy. Dell probably made a fortune during COVID because I would say they sold millions and millions of new laptops, desktops, mostly laptops, because everybody went remote. They were forced to go remote. Corporations begrudgingly went remote. Some liked it, some didn't, but the costs to do that were enormous. So a lot of people think, they went remote, didn't cost them a thing. Oh no, you've got to build a whole infrastructure, the networking, the internal servers, the external stuff, your backups, and the amount of hardware and support to put that into the homes was not negligible. It was huge.
That's a good point. And the other thing that people don't realize is, we're going to do our annual meeting online. It's free. That's good. Well, not really, especially if you're looking at something where you had, and you would think it would be, but it's incredibly intensive, and it really didn't cost anything less to offer something where you have 16 simultaneous tracks of people giving presentations live. And then and even if you record them, just to put them all in different places is a lot of coordination. But then the worst and the most expensive option was hybrid. We did that last year, and it was very expensive.
Now, you work with an association, and you
Yes.
do a lot of the coordination with events and training
Yes.
and everything else. What platform did you use to do the thing where you have 10, 20, 15 simultaneous events and people can choose where they go? They can move around from event to event. How did you folks handle that?
Well, we thought about opening just separate Zoom rooms, and we did for some. But for coordinating and having the actual integrated platform where you have places where little heads go, we ended up using Freeman. And Freeman is a company that provides audiovisual and conference support services in on face to face. So suddenly they had to learn how to do this and make a conference experience. And they did a good job. It was extremely challenging. And the reason that it was expensive is that when we were on site, we were in Denver for one and then Houston in another. You had to have the mixing board and the screens and all the stuff in the room. So you have the person who's remote projected on the screen, and then you also had to have an app where you can see who's online and who's observing. And you had to have the tech people. You had to have a special tech person for every single room instead of just going in and saying, "Okay, here you are. Let's plug in our program and our flash drive and put it up on the screen." You had all this live coordination, and you had at least 2 tech people in every room, and then and then you had to have lots of people in another room fielding questions and connectivity issues, password issues, access issues, on and on.
So even though everybody thinks, you go online, big deal, everybody does it all the time, you play a game, not that easy. There's a lot of work when you've got all the... So I'm counting somewhere between 30 and 40 people just to handle the rooms and the people and the questions and anything. That's a lot of people.
Yes. And then on top of that, we had other types of typical logistics things for like the receptions and the speaker readiness rooms and all those types of things for the face-to-face part. So, well, then they were face-to-face and hybrid. So I think we had probably 50 or 60 people, if you include Freeman plus our own, on site.
Huh. So I imagine that wasn't cheap.
No. It was horrifically expensive.
Yeah. So do you think it would have cost... Well, you've seen both. Would it cost less to actually do it totally on site?
Well, in 2020, we did it totally online, and it was less. And then and now we're going back to 100% face-to-face.
Okay.
And then we did have a kind of pseudo-hybrid when we were in Colombia, because people couldn't get visas to travel or whatever. So they said, okay, well, the technical presentations, go ahead and record them, send them to us. We'll upload them, put them, and make them available. And, was anybody watching? Did anybody access them? There's something about it being live that people like. For example, last week I put together a webinar. It was on critical minerals, brine mining, and geothermal. We had 580 people who signed up for it. It was free.
That's why.
Yeah, 220 were there at the maximum amount of time, but a lot of people were in different parts of the country or world, and they wanted to access at a different time. So it's just kind of interesting that we have that situation where it's pretty cheap and easy to do it live we had we had 4 speakers and myself, and then just people watching. That's easy. But when you get into simultaneous presentations and all that, it's different.
That is different. I know a lot of people have tried. This is not that long ago, maybe 5 years ago. Maybe 6, 7 years ago, was some of the initial... Sony was big into that. They were trying to do kind of a mall experience where you can go into a shopping.
Right.
It didn't work out too well. It was interesting, and I don't know how many more they've done of those, but the whole idea of trying to get people to show up at a mall and go shopping store to store as you're kind of virtually walking around, it wasn't easy. And you lost a lot of that experience once you actually went into that kind of mall environment. So definitely not an easy thing for people to do. Did you ever see one of those?
Yes. In fact, I went to a conference where they were proposing an edumall.
Edumall.
And
Okay.
They wanted everybody. It wanted to be like an Amazon, but a mall, where they would have the shell, and then the storefronts would be all the different universities, and as you might imagine, so that morphed into Coursera.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So that was the initial thoughts for it?
Well, they were simultaneous. They weren't the same people.
Okay.
But Edgemal, it was a university in Guadalajara, and they said that they'll just do they'll coordinate with all the universities in Latin America, and they would take a little bit of percentage for all the courses that they hosted. And I think it never went anywhere. I'm not sure why, but many people have had the same idea, and for some reason, they've had difficulties.
Now, before we wrap up, here's a question that I hear often. I've seen different results or different responses to it. What happens to the students, or the professors, let's say the professors, who like teaching in person? They like being in either the big auditorium rooms or in a smaller, more personal setting. How is that changing?
Well, we saw how it changed in 2020, where professors were forced to, even though they'd always had the opportunity to teach online in the past. But they said, no, I don't like that. I learned by interacting and having my charisma and my dynamic pontification.
Yeah. Yep.
or either that, or we like to do group work. I found that people had to, some of them got really complicated, and they would have little breakout groups and have things like that and think online and then some of them just ended up pontificating and wondering why everybody turned off their cameras.
Ah, okay. Interesting.
And then some people couldn't wait to go back to teaching face to face, and other people said, well, I kind of like this. And I figured out my own style, and I make everybody turn on their cameras, and I ask a lot of questions, and we do presentations, we share our screens. So a lot of people liked it, but they didn't think they would.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think we're still the jury's still out on what's going to happen in the future and how really successful some of the modalities are in the long run. They worked for a while. I'm not sure. There's still, I think, some research to be done and practices and see. I like the idea of online learning. And, it's funny. I remember way back when, where you could watch shows where they were showing kids, one day all kids will learn like this. It hasn't happened really. Not yet. I mean, we've gotten closer to it where a lot of kids are doing more work online than they used to. I've heard from some parents during the pandemic, for example, that the kids weren't learning much. Others claimed they were learning okay. It just really depended what school they went to also, what kind of curriculums they had and everything else. But anyway, that's a topic for another time. What do you see as the next big change, if any?
I see another big change in being able to kind of chunk different tasks. So, for example, because you can create content and assessments that you can do like even on your phone. So you're walking and you're listening to the video or the audio, and then you stop and sit down and do the little test. I see more of that. But they're shorter. It's not going to be an hour's worth of stuff. It's going to be 15 to 20 minutes.
Well, that would
I
be
see
nice.
more of that.
That would be nice. I always thought, for example, when I was going to school, most of them were on the semester basis. I hated semesters. I abhorred them. They took forever. And if you had a bad instructor, it was even worse. But I liked the quarters. And I would take, when I was in one college, I would take all of the summer school classes as the hardest of all because it was only 6 weeks. And 6 weeks of like all the science class. I loved it because now you could crunch at it, you're done, and no more. 20 weeks was torturous, at least for me. I didn't like the 20. I liked the 10 or the 6. That was great. And with online learning, you can chunk, like you said. You can make things a lot smaller. Though I still see a lot of online learning where people are still creating hour, 2, 4, 5 hour courses, and you go, oh, God. And they're not breaking them up. That's the sad part. And then you ask them, why don't you want to break it up? We have bookmarking. Okay, but given the fact that bookmarking works 50% of the time, not all the time, not a good strategy. And you're boring the hell out of your students.
Well, yeah. And then there's this whole concept of I hear professors say all the time, oh, we need to have a long semester because they need to soak in. And the soak in concept of learning, that actually isn't anything that works. What works is applying and problem solving in a real life problem
Right,
and
because
engaging in.
soaked in is really drowning. It's a fine line between the two. And I think you stimulate the mind when you've got a shorter course. If as you're teaching, if you can put things in smaller chunks, adults learn better that way. Even kids, I mean, they torture kids to no end in elementary school with some of the things they do because classes are probably too long. Yeah, I was shocked when I lived in Argentina, and I was there only once as a child for about 6 months, where I went to school down there when I was about 7 years old. And they were interesting. All through their school, they take something like 10 classes a day, but they're only like 20, 30-minute classes. And I thought that was interesting. Here, when I went to school in New York, growing up in elementary and part of high school, everything was at least an hour class. And that kind of dragged on, especially in some classes. But the whole idea of a 30-minute class, I loved it. It was great. You're in, you're out, and you move on to the next one. And then of course they
Well,
got smart.
yeah,
They didn't move us around classes. Then the teachers would move to different classes. I was going. Everybody liked the moving to classes because it was screw around time for 5 minutes. But that went away. Somebody got smart. But yeah, what do you think about the short versus the longer classes?
well, okay, so let's just say, let's give an example. Let's say we're looking at impact of drought in the US.
Hmm.
So then it could be an earth science class. So you go in and you talk, or meteorology classes. Okay, we're in a drought. Here are the data points. And today we're going to map where the drought is, and then the last month, rainfall. Where have we had rainfall, and how does it compare, and just on and on. But just like, so gathering statistics and summarizing them and making a conclusion. You can do that in 30 minutes, especially if you
Hmm.
have people, if you can have small groups. They can be inefficient, but they can be efficient if you've
Right.
got a task.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, Susan, thanks for coming on again today. And I know you're going to be gone the week after that. You're going to be at the big convention for
Yes.
your association, plus it combined with another association. So
Hmm.
you are going to be knee
Yeah,
deep in associations and events.
I will.
So you'll need a vacation when you get back, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but Susan will be back the week after next. So it'll be in about a little under a couple of weeks, and then we'll start again when Susan gets back, and right after Labor Day we'll hit it full force. Now we'll have a whole set of people lined up and scheduled. Summer's tough. It's really hard to get people during summer. It just doesn't happen, and
Hmm.
nobody's around. You can tell by the number of emails you send and the responses you get back. None. It's like, well, nobody's in. And then a week later, you get a response. Oh, sorry, I was on holidays or whatever. So people are just gone. So it's a good time to be gone, I guess. Well, anyway, we'll have a good one. Have a good trip. We'll see you when you do get back. And for all you people watching, thanks for watching. And we'll see you in about a week, week and a half. Take care, everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Here we go. And it's a wrap.